A single candle flickered inside the dimly lit gallery of the Palazzo Fiorentino, casting long, trembling shadows over ancient marble floors. Outside, Florence slept under a velvet night, except for the anguished weeping echoing from the east wing. When the guards forced the door open, they froze. Countess Valeria d'Este lay collapsed beneath her own oil portrait, fresh streaks of wet paint trailing from the painted eyes, dripping like tears down the canvas. Hercule Poirot, newly arrived in Florence, studied the impossible sight with a sharpened gaze. A death, a crying painting, and a mystery only he could untangle. Chapter 1. The Weeping Canvas. The ancient city of Florence lay wrapped in a velvet hush the night Countess Valeria d'Este died, as though the Renaissance stones themselves sensed the tremor that would soon pass through their foundations. Heavy clouds cloaked the sky in layers of bruised purple, and the narrow alleys of the Oltrarno district glittered with the faint sheen left behind by an evening rain. Lanterns flickered along the riverside cafes, and the Arno flowed with its eternal murmur, soft, steady, serenely ignorant of human tragedy. And yet, within the towering walls of Palazzo Fiorentino, a storm far more violent than any in the sky silently prepared itself. Hercule Poirot, newly arrived in Florence after a restful trip through Venice, had been invited to the palazzo as an honored guest of Countess Valeria. She was a woman of refinement, wealth, and a reputation built upon equal parts generosity and manipulation. People praised her patronage of the arts in the same breath with which they whispered about her capacity for cruelty. Poirot knew of her only through society gossip, but he accepted the invitation out of curiosity and the desire to view the celebrated portrait she had commissioned, an ambitious work by the rising painter Lorenzo Bellini. Yet he never imagined his arrival would coincide with her departure from the world. The palazzo itself was a magnificent fortress of artistry, soaring ceilings decorated with frescoes of cherubs and saints, marble floors polished to a mirror-like sheen, and corridors lined with tapestries depicting the triumphs and tragedies of the d'Este family. In the east wing, however, one room reigned above all others in reputation, the Galleria degli Spiriti, the Gallery of Spirits. It earned its name from the way shadows danced on its walls after sunset, stretching across the marble like wandering souls seeking refuge. It was in this room that the Countess insisted her portrait be displayed on the night of its unveiling. Guests gathered in silk and jewels beneath the golden chandeliers. Musicians played softly from an alcove, filling the air with the sweet melancholy of a violin. And yet, despite the elegance, Poirot sensed a tension, whispers here and there. Fleeting glances exchanged, an air of expectancy tinged with dread. Perhaps it was simply the dramatic temperament of the Italian elite. Perhaps it was something far more dangerous. As midnight approached, the unveiling ceremony concluded, and the guests drifted toward the banquet hall. Poirot lingered briefly near the portrait, admiring the technique. Lorenzo had captured Countess Valeria with meticulous precision, her posture regal, her gaze sharp, her lips curved in an enigmatic half-smile. The background was muted, drawing the viewer's attention to the woman's commanding expression. It was a portrait that held too much of its subject's spirit, so much so that Poirot felt a faint prickling at the back of his neck, as though the Countess herself were studying him through the painted eyes. It was only when the hour neared 1 that the first scream shattered the tranquillity of the palazzo. Poirot turned sharply. A maid came running down the hallway of the east wing, her face pale, her hair in disarray. "Signori! Aiuto! Something terrible!" Her voice trembled so violently that the words barely escaped her lips. Alarm rippled through the guests as they followed her, led by the unmistakable authority in Poirot's stride. The gallery of spirits stood before them, its towering doors eerily half open. A cold draught seeped through the gap, carrying with it a faint, unsettling sound, soft, rhythmic, like water dripping from a leaky roof. But the palazzo roof was entirely sealed. Poirot felt a slow, creeping dread settle upon him. He pushed open the doors. Candles flickered in the vast darkness, their flames trembling as though frightened by what they illuminated. Beneath the towering portrait of the Countess, a figure lay motionless. And it took only one glance to recognize her. Countess Valeria d'Este was dead. But that alone was not the source of the terror that seized everyone present. On the canvas, the freshly unveiled portrait, the painted eyes glistened with wetness. Streams of crimson-tinted tears trickled down the Countess's painted cheeks, catching the candlelight like droplets of blood. A collective gasp rose from the guests. Some crossed themselves. Others took a step back, whispering about omens and curses. Even those who prided themselves on logic could not deny the eerie sensation that filled the room. Poirot moved forward with deliberate calm, though his heart beat with quickened gravity. Kneeling beside the Countess, he examined her carefully. Her hands lay folded at her sides, unnaturally serene for someone who had supposedly collapsed in fright or pain. Her face was unmarked, lips slightly parted, eyes frozen in a final moment of astonishment. But there were no signs of struggle, no marks of violence, no spilled wine or broken glass around her. Poirot raised his head slowly toward the portrait. The tears glistened more vividly from this angle, as though freshly painted. Inspector Ricci arrived moments later, summoned by palace staff. He was a stout man with a stern expression and a moustache that would have offended. Poirot's sensibilities had the moment been less grave. "Good God!" Ricci muttered. "What trickery is this?" Poirot stood. "Not trickery, Inspector. Something much more deliberate." Ricci frowned. She must have fainted. Heart attack, perhaps. The stress of tonight. Poirot touched a gloved finger to the canvas. He examined the wet streak that stained it. Fresh pigment, wet oil, applied not hours ago, but minutes. No, she did not faint. She did not fall naturally, and this, he gestured to the crying portrait, this is no accident of chemistry. The inspector's gaze hardened. "You believe it was staged?" "Mais oui," Poirot murmured. "The tears, the canvas, the perfect positioning of the body. This was arranged to send a message." He stepped back, surveying the shadows that crawled along the gallery walls. "And I suspect the one who arranged it is still within these very rooms." The guests murmured fearfully. A few demanded to leave at once, but Poirot raised a hand. "No one leaves the palazzo tonight, I insist." Inspector Ricci hesitated, then nodded. "Seal the exits." The maid who had first discovered the scene trembled uncontrollably, clutching her apron. Poirot approached her gently. "Mademoiselle, tell me exactly what you saw." Her voice quivered. I was delivering linens to the guest rooms. I thought I heard someone weeping. I followed the sound to the gallery. At first I thought the Countess was crying. But when I stepped closer," she swallowed, "I realized the sound didn't come from her. It came from the painting." A cold ripple spread through the onlookers. Poirot asked, "And what happened then?" I screamed and ran to get help. He thanked her softly, though his mind spun with possibilities. Fear heightened the senses, distorted perception. A frightened maid might mistake the sound of dripping paint, or something else, for weeping. But Poirot knew better than to dismiss any detail outright. Often, truth hid within the tremors of frightened memory. The inspector circled the body. There is no wound, no blood. Poirot pressed a hand to his chin. There is something else. Look at how her expression differs from the portrait. Ricci frowned. How so? The painted countess appears composed, confident, but the real countess, she looks surprised, as though she saw something she did not expect. Poirot gestured subtly. Something or someone that struck her heart with enough force to still it. Ricci scowled. Fear? Perhaps. Poirot's eyes drifted once more to the painting. Or betrayal. He noticed something then. A faint, lingering scent in the air. One that did not match the candle wax, nor the dying roses arranged nearby. It was sharper, tangier, the smell of fresh linseed oil mixed with a hint of turpentine. Poirot inhaled thoughtfully. Someone had been here very recently with painting, supplies. He turned to Lorenzo Bellini, who had arrived at the gallery pale and shaking. Monsieur Bellini, you are the artist who painted this portrait? Lorenzo nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. Yes, I am. Tell me, were these tears part of your work? Lorenzo's eyes widened. No, I would never defile my own painting. This is vandalism. Poirot's gaze sharpened. He studied the man's trembling hands, the specks of paint on his shirt collar. They could be remnants of his work earlier in the day, or they could be signs of something else entirely. Before Poirot could question him further, a gust of wind swept across the gallery, extinguishing several candles at once. Shadows lunged toward the ceiling, the vast space plunging into pockets of darkness that swallowed corners whole. Gasps rose among the guests. Poirot stood perfectly still. Somewhere deep within the gallery, faint but unmistakable, a sound echoed, a soft, muffled sob. This time, it was no trick of imagination. Someone else was here, watching, hiding, waiting. Poirot turned slowly, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the shadows beyond the portrait. He could feel it, the presence of guilt, thick and trembling, clinging to the air like smoke. Inspector Ricci, Poirot murmured, his voice low but commanding. Search the gallery and the adjoining corridors. Our visitor has not yet fled. Ricci barked orders to the guards, and the guests were ushered out, their terrified whispers echoing in the hall. Lorenzo lingered, staring at the portrait with haunted eyes. Poirot laid a hand on his shoulder. Courage, monsieur. The truth will reveal itself. Alone now with the Countess and her painted likeness, Poirot allowed himself a moment of stillness. He gazed at the portrait, the tears now drying into darkened streaks, and at the silent body below. Madam, he said softly, whoever you feared tonight, they feared you more. The candles flickered again, casting long, wavering shadows across the marble. The portrait's eyes gleamed with a curious intensity, as though holding secrets too heavy to bear. Poirot adjusted his tie, his mind already assembling fragments. Scent, shadow, paint, fear, opportunity. A puzzle lay before him, intricate and carefully arranged. Someone had painted those tears. Someone had been in this gallery after the unveiling. Someone had left the Countess lying beneath her portrait with the expression of a woman who had glimpsed the truth too late. And Hercule Poirot, with all the sharpness of his little grey cells, vowed that before dawn broke over Florence, he would know exactly who that someone was. The night outside was still, but inside Palazzo Fiorentino, the hunt had already begun. Chapter 2. Shadows among the guests. The palazzo's atmosphere had shifted into something cold and brittle by the time Hercule Poirot stepped from the Gallery of Spirits and entered the grand corridor that stretched, like an artery through the heart of Palazzo Fiorentino. The vibrant chatter that earlier filled its halls had vanished, replaced now by the hushed tremors of fear, scandal, and suspicion. Guards moved briskly to secure doors and windows, their boots echoing sharply across the marble floor. The guests, once confident in their silks and jewels, now huddled together like nervous schoolchildren awaiting reprimand. Poirot observed them quietly, his sharp eyes absorbing every tremor, every whispered exchange, every flicker of guilt that crossed a trembling lip. Inspector Ricci approached him with an air of tension. "Monsieur Poirot, we have searched the gallery and the adjacent chambers. No intruder, no hidden passage, no sign of anyone who might have slipped in." Poirot raised one eyebrow. "And yet, mon ami, you forget something important. Whoever is responsible is not an intruder. They are here among us." Ricci's scowl deepened. "You believe one of the guests killed her?" Poirot folded his hands neatly behind his back. "But of course. What intruder would know the palazzo's layout, the timing of the unveiling, the habits of the Countess? What intruder would dare to paint tears onto a portrait under the watchful eyes of so many guards? No, no. This crime was intimate, personal, a message delivered with theatrical precision. And the cause of death?" Ricci pressed. Poirot shook his head gently. "I cannot yet say. There was no obvious trauma. But the expression, that expression, it speaks of shock, of recognition. The murderer stood close enough, or revealed something shocking enough, to still her heart." Ricci muttered a curse under his breath. "Damn these aristocrats and their secrets." "Precisely," Poirot said softly. "And now it is time we learn them." He walked toward the drawing room where the guests had been gathered for questioning. The room was a splendid chamber, lined with tapestries of historic battles and Renaissance romances. Tonight, however, its warmth was choked by tension. The guests turned as Poirot entered, their eyes following him with a mixture of dread and desperate hope. Poirot surveyed them one by one. Lorenzo Bellini, the artist, stood by the fireplace, arms wrapped tightly around himself. His dark hair was tousled, and his eyes were glassy with shock. He wore the fragility of an artist who believed his creation had turned against him. Giulia Verani, Valeria's young secretary, sat rigid on a settee. Her auburn hair framed a pale and anxious face, and her gloved hands twisted repeatedly in her lap. She possessed an intelligence Poirot could sense at once. A woman who listened more than she spoke. Dr. Matteo Orsini, the Countess's physician, sat with a stiff dignity. His broad shoulders and stern features gave him the air of a man accustomed to command, yet his eyes darted nervously whenever the conversation shifted toward the Countess's death. Signor Emilio d'Este, the Countess's estranged cousin and only surviving close relative, leaned casually against a bookshelf with a glass of cognac in hand. But the casualness was forced. His jaw clenched in intervals, betraying underlying agitation. Rumours around the palazzo whispered of tension between him and the Countess over inheritance disputes. And finally, Isabella Conti, a stunning woman draped in midnight blue silk, reclined on a chaise with the air of someone too elegant to be troubled by death. Her beauty was incandescent, her expression unreadable. She'd been a close friend of Valeria, or some said her rival in matters both social and romantic. Poirot cleared his throat softly. The room fell silent. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his tone polite yet unyielding, "you have my gratitude for cooperating in this unfortunate circumstance. The death of the Countess Valeria is a tragedy, but I assure you it is not one that shall remain shrouded in mystery for long." The guests exchanged uneasy glances. Poirot continued, "I will speak to each of you in turn, but first I have a question for all present. Did any among you leave the ballroom after the portrait's unveiling?" For a moment, no one spoke. Then Julia Verani raised her hand timidly. "I stepped out briefly to retrieve my notebook from the cloakroom, only for a minute." Lorenzo followed, his voice cracking. I went to the courtyard to smoke. I felt overwhelmed after the unveiling." Dr. Orsini muttered, "I was in the dining hall preparing her regular medication that she takes after supper." Emilio d'Este shrugged. "I remained in the ballroom. Many can confirm this." Isabella Conti smiled faintly. "As did I. The music was delightful." Poirot nodded, his mind already arranging pieces. He decided to begin with Lorenzo, who seemed closest to emotional collapse. "Monsieur Bellini, if you would join me in the adjoining study." The artist swallowed hard, but obeyed. In the dimly lit study, Poirot motioned him to sit. Lorenzo collapsed into the chair, burying his face in his hands. "She is dead. Dead beneath my painting. How am I to bear it?" Poirot observed him for a moment. "Tell me, monsieur, you had no argument with the Countess tonight?" Lorenzo hesitated. "No. Well—" His eyes darted away. "There was tension, yes. She was not pleased with the portrait." Poirot tilted his head. "Ah, but the guests praised it. She wanted it to show her youth, her beauty," Lorenzo muttered bitterly. "She demanded revisions, many revisions. Even threatened to withdraw patronage from my future commissions." "And yet," Poirot murmured softly, "you concealed this tension earlier." Lorenzo's face crumpled. I feared how it would sound. She is dead, and now any complaint of mine sounds like motive, does it not?" Poirot did not answer. Instead he pressed gently, "Did you return to the gallery after the unveiling?" Lorenzo froze. "No, I swear it. Yet you have paint stains on your collar." Lorenzo touched his collar with shaking fingers. "These are from earlier today. I was working until the last moment." Poirot studied him quietly, then dismissed him. Next came Julia Verani. She entered with timid steps, her eyes downcast. Poirot gestured for her to sit. "Mademoiselle Verani," he began kindly, "you worked closely with the Countess. Did she appear troubled this evening?" Julia's lips trembled. The Countess was always intense. Tonight she was agitated. "In what way?" Julia hesitated, then whispered, "She said she had learned something about one of the guests." Poirot leaned forward. "Did she reveal what it was?" "No, but she said it would change everything." Julia clenched her hands. "I thought it was merely her dramatics." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "And she asked you to fetch your notebook?" Julia nodded. "Yes. She wanted me to write down instructions for the following week's engagements. When I returned, she was gone." Her voice quivered. "She rarely left without informing me." Poirot dismissed her with a gentle nod. She was frightened, but not hiding guilt. Dr. Matteo Orsini entered next, his posture rigid. "Doctor," Poirot said, "you knew the Countess's health better than anyone. Was she ill?" "Not gravely," Orsini replied. "Her heart was fragile, but not enough to kill her suddenly. She took medication nightly. I prepared it myself." Poirot narrowed his eyes. "And tonight?" "I did the same," Orsini snapped. "If you imply poisoning, dismiss the thought at once." Poirot merely smiled politely. "But I did not mention poisoning." Orsini stiffened, just enough to betray unease. Poirot studied him until the doctor nearly squirmed, then dismissed him. Isabella Conti entered with a rustle of silk and a faint scent of jasmine. "Monsieur Poirot," she purred, "this is all so terrible." Poirot observed her cool composure. "Madame, you were a close friend of the Countess, or so society says." A shadow crossed her eyes. "We were companions of convenience. Valeria could be generous, but also cruel." "Cruel in what way?" Isabella shrugged. She liked to remind everyone that Florence revolved around her. If someone threatened her spotlight, she clipped their wings. Her tone hardened briefly. "She once tried to ruin my opera debut." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "And yet you attended her portrait unveiling. One must be civil." Isabella replied smoothly. "Besides, she invited me. We had reached a cordial truce." Poirot leaned forward. "Where were you at the time of death?" "In the ballroom," she replied without hesitation. "Dancing." Poirot dismissed her, though not without noting the flicker of something undefinable in her eyes. Finally came Emilio d'Este. He strode in with exaggerated confidence, taking the high chair before Poirot offered it. "What do you want to ask, Monsieur Detective?" he muttered. "I suppose you think I killed her for money?" Poirot steepled his fingers. "Did you?" Emilio's eyes flashed with anger. "Absolutely not. Yes, we argued. Yes, she threatened to alter the will again, but I am no murderer." "Threaten tonight?" Emilio hesitated. "Earlier in the evening. She claimed she had discovered proof of something I did, something shameful." He downed the last of his drink. "She would not say what." Poirot kept his tone soft. "And that did not concern you." "It enraged me," Emilio corrected, "but I did not kill her." Poirot dismissed him. Alone once more, Poirot sat in stillness. The pieces shifted, clicked, slid, a portrait defaced, a woman dead, tears that were paint, a gallery filled with shadows, 5 suspects, each clutching secrets like daggers hidden in silk. Poirot stood and returned to the gallery of spirits. The candles had been relit. The Countess's body had been covered with a sheet, but the portrait remained, its painted tears dried into dark crimson streaks. Poirot approached it, examining the brush strokes, a thin application, hasty, perhaps applied with a small brush, or a fingertip. He looked closer. There, near the edge of the tear, a faint indentation, a fingerprint. Poirot's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. He turned. Someone stood behind him, Giulia Verani. But her face was not timid now. It was white, drained, terrified. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, clutching the doorway, "there is something you must see, something in the Countess's study." Poirot stepped forward. "What is it, mademoiselle?" Giulia swallowed. Her voice trembled. "A letter, addressed to you." Poirot froze. "To me?" he repeated slowly. Giulia nodded, fear darkening her gaze. "It was sealed," she whispered, "but the Countess wrote your name on it hours before she died." Poirot's heart stilled. Valeria d'Este, the woman who died beneath her own portrait, had written to him before her murder. Whatever truth she had discovered, whatever secret she feared, she had turned instinctively to him. Poirot inhaled deeply. "Take me to it," he whispered. And together they stepped into the dim corridor, the shadows closing in like silent witnesses to a deepening mystery. Chapter 3. Whispers Beneath the Duomo. The rain had softened into a mist by the time Hercule Poirot reached Via della Pergola, where the small trattorias were just beginning to light their lamps. Florence, after sunset, had a peculiar texture. Shadows lengthened like velvet threads, and the stones of the centuries-old buildings glistened with a melancholy sheen, as though they too mourned the day's unsettled events. Poirot walked with measured steps, his polished shoes tapping lightly, his cane accompanying the rhythm with a gentle metallic tick. Though others might have hurried in such dimness, he walked with assurance. For Poirot, darkness merely thinned the veil between truth and lies. He was on his way to question the late Aurelia Moretti's circle, her friends, patrons, rivals, and those who lived in her orbit like moths circling a dangerous flame. He had studied her portrait again before leaving the villa. The same portrait that had been found weeping, its painted face streaked with what resembled fresh tears. A coincidence? A trick of humidity? Or a symbolic gesture placed by an intelligent murderer? Poirot's little grey cells insisted nothing about that painting had been accidental. Aurelia herself had been a woman of uncommon influence. A celebrated soprano who had lost her voice in a tragic on-stage collapse years ago, she had since rebuilt her fame through her art collection and her patronage of Italian youth talent. Yet for all her charity, she had been a woman surrounded by conflict. Jealous protégés, resentful competitors, suitors whose hearts she bruised, and collectors who envied her rare acquisitions. In death, she seemed an unfinished aria, cut mid-note. Poirot's first destination was La Pergamena Blue, a discreet wine bar favoured by artists and philosophers. Inside, candle-lit tables flickered beneath frescoed ceilings, and a faint aroma of rosemary bread floated in the warm air. The crowd parted respectfully for him. Fame followed Poirot as faithfully as his moustache. At a corner table sat Alessio Bianchi, Aurelia's former pupil, young, handsome, with the haunted eyes of a tenor who believed destiny had slighted him. Poirot took a seat opposite him without invitation. Alessio's fingers trembled around his glass. "You were very close to Signorina Moretti," Poirot began, voice soft but firm. Alessio laughed bitterly. "Close? She made me. She destroyed me. I owe her everything and nothing. You speak in riddles, mon ami. But murder is seldom poetic." Alessio's breath caught. "I didn't kill her. I adored Aurelia, even when she treated me as though my voice were a weapon to be sharpened only for her benefit." Poirot leaned forward. "You performed for her the night she died?" "Yes," the young man whispered. "She asked for my rendition of Ombra Mai Fu. She said she wanted to hear something pure before she made a difficult decision." Poirot noted that carefully. "A decision regarding you?" Alessio hesitated. "Regarding her entire estate. She had told me she was revising her will. Some would benefit, some would lose everything." A motive was forming, delicate yet sharp. Before Poirot could pose another question, the sound of hurried footsteps approached. Margherita Bellini, Aurelia's private maid, pushed her way through the crowd, breathless and pale. "Monsieur Poirot, I must speak with you. Something terrible. I should have told you earlier." Poirot rose immediately. "Calm yourself, mademoiselle. What has happened?" Her voice shook. "It is the painting. Il ritratto che piange. It cried again. This afternoon, after you left the villa." A stir passed through the bar. Alessio crossed himself. Poirot, however, narrowed his eyes not in fear but in calculation. "Describe precisely what you saw." Margherita wrung her hands. "The tears, they were fresh, not moisture from the air, real droplets, and on the floor beneath the frame, someone had placed a white glove." Poirot's mind quickened. "A glove? Whose?" She shook her head. "I do not know, but it was embroidered with a gold letter L." Poirot exchanged a sharp glance with Alessio. The young tenor's face had gone chalk white. "L?" Poirot murmured. "For Lorenzo Conti, perhaps?" The name fell like a weight between them. Count Lorenzo Conti, art dealer, gambler, Aurelia's volatile ex-lover. A man with a temper forged in fire and a reputation for debts as deep as Mediterranean trenches. Alessio swallowed hard. If the glove is his, then he was at the villa. and he despised Aurelia for refusing to settle his debts. Poirot placed a gentle hand on Margarita's trembling arm. "You have done well, mademoiselle, but there is more, yes? Something else troubles you." Tears brimmed in her eyes. "Monsieur, Aurelia was afraid. She told me, 2 nights before her death, that someone had been watching her from the garden. A man in a dark coat. He left footprints and mud on the terrace." Poirot felt a chill, not supernatural, but logical. "And you erased these footprints?" "Yes. She begged me not to report it. She feared scandal." Poirot exhaled slowly. Aurelia had been a woman living among shadows, secrets tightening around her like threads in a tapestry. "I must return to the villa at once," he said. "There is something the murderer wishes to hide, and something the crying portrait tries to reveal." But as Poirot prepared to leave, the wind pushed open the bar's door, and a hooded figure standing just outside caught his eye. The man hesitated only a moment before turning sharply into the alley. Poirot's instincts flared. "Alessio, stay here! Margarita, go to a safe place. I shall follow our shadow." He stepped into the narrow street, the air cool and metallic. The hooded figure moved swiftly, boots striking puddles, heading toward the Piazza della Santissima Annunziata. Poirot followed, not running but moving with determined grace. He lost sight of the stranger only once, when the man turned beside the archway of a shuttered bookstore. Poirot rounded the corner. The alley was empty, but on the cobblestones lay a single object, wet, glinting beneath lantern light. A second glove, embroidered with the same gold letter. L. Poirot picked it up carefully, turning it between his fingers. The gloves were a message, no, a declaration. But from whom? A murderer taunting him? Or someone planting evidence with almost theatrical precision? He whispered to the night, "Someone plays a dangerous game with Hercule Poirot. But the truth, it cannot hide forever." Just as he slipped the glove into his coat, a voice echoed faintly across the square. "Poirot, stay out of this." A warning, a threat, or an invitation? Poirot lifted his chin, moustache bristling. "The game is underway," he murmured, "and it is I who shall decide how it ends." Chapter 4. The Man in the Velvet Coat. The night settled over Florence like a heavy velvet curtain, muffling sound and deepening shadows, as Hercule Poirot walked back toward the Moretti villa. The warning still echoed in his mind, "Poirot, stay out of this." A coward's threat delivered from the safety of darkness. Yet what fascinated him most was the voice itself. Calm, low, measured, a man accustomed to control. Poirot replayed its tone the way a maestro studies a single violin note. Every slight tremor, every echo, every hesitation held a clue. This mystery was no random act of violence. No, it possessed a dramatic elegance. Someone was orchestrating each moment with a conductor's precision. At the villa gates, Poirot paused. The garden, illuminated by faint lanterns, stood unnervingly still. He stepped onto the gravel path, his shoes crunching in the hush. Something about the air felt altered, as though a disturbance lingered. He moved closer to the terrace where Margarita had mentioned the mysterious footprints. Now, under the moonlight, Poirot saw faint impressions still visible on the stone, shallow but present. They seemed to belong to a man with a long stride, perhaps moving swiftly, perhaps glancing over his shoulder. The prints were fresh. Someone had returned. Poirot entered the villa, where the corridors were cloaked in half-light. The walls, adorned with Aurelia Moretti's curated collection of Renaissance pieces, cast faint gleams from their gilded frames. He ascended the staircase and turned toward the gallery room where the infamous crying portrait hung. As he approached, he detected a peculiar scent in the air. Something metallic, mixed with cologne. Not the usual aroma of old varnish and antique oils. He stepped inside. The room greeted him with silence, yet something was undeniably wrong. Poirot approached the portrait, letting his gaze sweep every detail. The painted Aurelia gazed downward with her eternal sorrow. Her tears dried but still visible. Beneath the frame, the wooden floor bore a faint shimmer. Poirot knelt, touched the surface lightly with his fingertip, and lifted it. A thin smear of silver dust clung to his skin. "Zinc charcoal powder," Poirot murmured, "used by restoration artists." Someone had been attempting to handle the painting, perhaps to remove something behind it. He stood and gently pulled the portrait away from the wall. Behind it lay a small cavity, bare, empty. An indentation in the dust inside the cavity clearly showed that something rectangular and thin had once been stored there. A document? A letter? A will? Aurelia's difficult decision? Poirot replaced the portrait carefully, his mind racing. He turned toward the door and stopped. A shadow moved across the threshold. Not the usual household staff. This figure was tall, wearing a velvet coat, the fabric shimmering like night silk. The man did not enter. He lingered, as though studying Poirot in return. Poirot said softly, "Bonsoir, mon ami. You choose shadows as companions, a curious preference." No response. Only the stillness of someone holding breath. Poirot took a step forward. "You left me a glove. A courtesy or a challenge?" The figure turned abruptly and disappeared down the corridor. Poirot followed at once, but when he reached the end of the hallway, the velvet-coated man had vanished into the villa's labyrinthine rooms. The detective stood in the silent corridor, listening closely. No creaks, no hurried footsteps. The man moved with uncanny skill. Poirot exhaled. "A ghost of flesh and blood," he whispered. He descended to the drawing room, where he found Signora Isabella Rinaldi, Aurelia's cousin and a woman of sharp cheekbones and sharper opinions. She stood by the fireplace sipping tea, her silk gown shimmering like frost. "You roam the villa as though it were your own," she said coolly. Poirot ignored the jab. "Madame, was there a man here tonight? A guest in a velvet coat?" Her brows lifted. "Velvet? How dramatic! No, Monsieur Poirot, none of our guests own such theatrical garments," she smirked. "Perhaps Aurelia's ghost walks the halls, after all." Poirot studied her. Her composure was flawless, but beneath the veneer lay tension. Her eyes flicked often to the window. Fear or calculation? "Tell me, Signora," Poirot said gently. "Did you know Aurelia intended to revise her will?" Her fingers tightened around her teacup. Everyone knew. Aurelia adored her drama. She hinted at changes, but never revealed them. Changes that might have affected you. Isabella's lips curved into a cold smile. Aurelia was generous, yet unpredictable. If she wished to exclude me, so be it. I do not murder for money, Monsieur Poirot. A clever answer, but not a truthful one. Poirot sensed her trembling beneath the surface. Before he could probe further, the front door burst open. A gust of wind swept in, along with Inspector Ricci, his dark uniform dampened by the lingering mist. "Poirot!" he called. "We found something. In the river." The room stiffened. Poirot approached him. "What have you found, mon cher inspector?" Ricci removed his hat. A ledger, belonging to Aurelia, hidden inside a waterproof sleeve. Someone threw it into the Arno earlier tonight. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And someone watched me at the villa while his accomplice attempted to conceal the evidence. Ricci nodded grimly. Inside the ledger, we found a list of payments, dated over months, large sums, All to the same, person. And the name? Poirot asked. Ricci handed him a small note. Poirot unfolded it slowly. A single name, written in Aurelia's elegant script, Lorenzo Conti. Poirot's thoughts aligned like stars shifting into constellation. Lorenzo had motive, desperation, debt, jealousy. But the elegance of this scheme felt beyond a man known for impulsive tempers. No, someone else orchestrated this. Someone with access, insight, and fear. Poirot looked at Ricci. We must visit Count Conti at once. Before they could leave, a loud sound echoed from upstairs, a crash, followed by a muffled cry. Poirot and Ricci exchanged glances and rushed toward the staircase. As they reached the gallery room, they found a window wide open, curtains billowing like frantic arms. On the floor lay a toppled vase, shattered violently. Poirot stepped closer. Outside, footprints led from the window into the darkness of the garden, and caught on the window latch, fluttering like a taunt, was a torn scrap of fabric, black velvet. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The man in the velvet coat grows bolder, he said, and he leaves breadcrumbs for us. But is he leading or misleading? He picked up the velvet scrap, feeling its smooth texture, its expensive weave. Ricci whispered, Is Conti involved? Poirot shook his head slowly. No, a man who leaves theatre props is someone who wishes to be seen. Conti is many things, but not a performer. Poirot turned toward the dark garden, the night whispering secrets across the tall cypress trees. Someone plays puppeteer, he murmured, and the hour of revelation draws nearer. Chapter 5. The Count's Secrets in the Shadows. The Palazzo Conti rose before Poirot and Inspector Ricci like a brooding titan of old Florence. Massive stone walls, narrow arrow-slit windows, and a pair of lion sculptures guarding its entrance with ancient disdain. The dawn had barely touched the sky. Faint blue light bled along the horizon, casting the palace in a cold, spectral hue. Poirot found this fitting. A house built on pride often concealed the darkest truths. Inside, the air smelled of tobacco, leather, and expensive perfumes, scents of a man who clung to luxury even as his fortunes collapsed. A servant led them through a series of echoing hallways until they reached a drawing room lit only by a flickering hearth. There, seated like a fallen monarch, was Count Lorenzo Conti. Heavy-eyed, dishevelled, and yet unmistakably aristocratic, he looked up with a mixture of exhaustion and defiance. Poirot stepped forward. "Buongiorno, Count Conti. We regret the early hour, but murder is an impatient matter." Conti snorted. "And you believe I murdered Aurelia? I see the whispers reach even foreign detectives." Ricci unfolded the ledger recovered from the Arno. "Aurelia Moretti recorded payments she made to you. Large ones, regular ones." Conti's jaw tightened. "Debts," he said bluntly. "She helped me. She pitied me. But money does not make a man kill his benefactor." Poirot observed him closely. "Tell me, Count, did you visit the Moretti villa last night? Or earlier this week?" "Twice," Conti answered without hesitation. "Once 3 days ago. She summoned me. And once last night. Yes, I left her a note. Nothing more." Poirot's brows lifted. "A note? And where did you leave it?" "In the gallery," Conti replied. "Behind her, her favourite portrait. I thought she would find it." Poirot exchanged a glance with Ricci. "The cavity behind the painting, the missing document." "Describe this note, monsieur." Conti hesitated, weighing something internally before answering. "I wanted to end it. The financial help, the rumours, the dependence. I told her I would repay everything, that she must not revise her will on my account." Poirot's moustache bristled. So you knew she was changing her will? Conti inhaled sharply. She told me she intended to protect me, to leave provisions that would free me from my creditors. He shook his head bitterly. I refused. I do not want charity wrapped in pity. He threw back a glass of brandy despite the early hour. Poirot observed the trembling in the man's hand, the exhaustion in his eyes. This was not the behavior of a triumphant murderer. It was the collapse of a man cornered by circumstances. Poirot leaned closer. Count Conti, do you own a velvet coat? The question seemed to strike Conti like a blow. He frowned. Yes, a black velvet one, a family heirloom. Ricci stiffened. Then you were the man inside the villa last night. Conti stood abruptly. No, I have not worn that coat in weeks. It is missing, stolen perhaps. The servants are incompetent, but I swear to you, I did not enter that villa. Poirot believed the tremor in his voice, but belief was not evidence. May we search your wardrobe? Ricci asked sharply. Conti hesitated, but nodded. The search yielded no velvet coat. Only an empty hanger, its wooden shoulders slightly bowed, with a faint trace of velvet fibers clinging to the metal hook. Poirot's mind sharpened. Someone had stolen the coat to impersonate Conti, or to implicate him. As they returned to the drawing-room, Poirot noticed a framed photograph on the mantel. Aurelia, smiling radiantly, stood beside a young woman with striking features, dark curls, intelligent eyes, a calm intensity. Poirot lifted the frame. Who is this? Conti exhaled. Her name is Lucia Ferraro, Aurelia's protégée, a gifted painter. She was Aurelia's closest companion these past months. Poirot studied the photograph with immediate interest. And where might we find Signorina Ferraro? Conti's lips hardened. Good luck. She vanished the night Aurelia died, packed her things and disappeared without goodbye. The servants saw her leaving before dawn. Poirot felt the pieces shift subtly, forming the shape of a secret yet to be spoken. She was devoted to Aurelia? Poirot asked. Conti gave a humorless laugh. Devoted? Obsessed? She guarded Aurelia like a jealous lover. Resented anyone who approached her too closely. Even I. Poirot set down the frame gently. Tell me, Count, did Lucia know of your financial troubles? Conti looked away. Everyone knew. Did she know Aurelia planned to help you? His silence was answer enough. Poirot took a slow breath, feeling the storm gathering. You believe Signorina Ferraro capable of harm? Conti rubbed his temples. I believe her capable of anything for Aurelia, and capable of anything against those who threatened her. Ricci wrote down the name swiftly, his expression tightening. We will issue a search request. But Poirot raised a hand. Non, mon ami. Lucia Ferraro is intelligent, emotional, and now desperate. If she hides, it is because she fears exposure. Poirot turned back to Conti. One last question. Did you ever see someone watching Aurelia in the garden? A man in a dark coat? Conti's eyes widened. Yes, a week before she died. I thought it was a thief or admirer. Aurelia dismissed it, said I worried too much. Poirot felt the threads tighten together. A missing will, a stolen coat, a vanished protégé, a mysterious watcher, a portrait that cried. The story was no longer a simple murder. It had become an opera of obsession, loyalty, and betrayal. As they prepared to leave, Conti called out, Poirot, if you find Lucia, be gentle. She loved Aurelia more than any of us. Poirot looked at him, his expression grave. Love, monsieur, can be as sharp as a dagger when threatened. Outside the palazzo, the morning sun finally broke through the clouds, illuminating Florence in golden light. But Poirot felt no warmth. Ricci asked quietly, Do you think Lucia killed Aurelia? Poirot replied softly, I think, Inspector, that we follow the wrong shadow. The velvet coat is a distraction. The true killer hides behind a far more delicate fabric, emotion. He paused at the palace gates, eyes drifting toward the distant spires of Florence. And emotion, when wounded, commits the greatest crimes. Chapter 6. Midnight Visitors. The sun had barely risen when Zara jolted awake, her heart pounding as though she had just escaped from a nightmare. The images from the previous night flashed before her eyes. A man's trembling voice, the coded USB hidden in his locker, and the sudden knowledge that her father's legacy was not just a memory, but an ongoing danger that had already started tightening its claws around her life. The silence of the morning felt eerie, too calm, as if the world was holding its breath. She walked to the window, noticing 2 unknown bikes parked at the corner of the street. Or maybe they had been there before, and she simply never paid enough attention. But now, every small change felt suspicious. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her chest. After a quick breakfast that she barely tasted, Zara and Aman met again at the old cafe near the university, one of the few places not under surveillance, or so they hoped. Aman looked exhausted, dark circles beneath his eyes telling their own story. "We don't have much time," he whispered, sliding a small notepad across the table. "I decrypted part of the file. Your father, he wasn't who the world thought he was." Zara's throat tightened. She tried to steady her voice. "What do you mean?" The words felt like shards of glass. Aman took a deep breath, leaning closer. "Your father uncovered a network. Politicians, businessmen, security officials, people who controlled major operations from the shadows. He called them the Silent Order. And the USB contains enough evidence to bring them down." For a moment, the noise of the cafe disappeared. Zara felt as if she were falling, weightless. Her father had always been a calm, gentle man, a journalist known for deep stories, but never tied to anything dangerous. She remembered him coming home late, tired but smiling. Never once did she imagine he carried the burden of exposing a criminal empire. She closed her eyes, trying to process the revelation. "If this is true," she whispered, "then they must have killed him." Aman nodded slowly. "Not just that, they're watching anyone tied to him, including you." A cold shiver ran down her spine. Before she could respond, the door of the cafe swung open. 2 men in black jackets walked in, scanning the crowd with sharp eyes. Zara felt her pulse thundering in her ears. Aman instantly lowered his gaze, pretending to stir his tea. "Stay calm," he murmured. But calm was impossible. The men were moving table to table, showing a photo on their phone. Too far to see, but Zara already knew what picture it would be. Her. The world shrunk around her as they neared. Aman stood abruptly. "We have to leave, now!" They slipped out the back door, stepping into the narrow alleyway. The morning air felt cold against Zara's burning skin. They ran, weaving through the maze of streets until the noise of the cafe faded behind them. Only when they reached an abandoned parking lot did they stop to catch their breath. Zara pressed her back against the wall, her chest heaving. "This is my fault," she said, her voice cracking. "You got involved because of me." Aman shook his head firmly. "I'm involved because I care. Your father trusted me before he died. He asked me to protect you if something happened to him. I never told you because I hoped you'd never be pulled into this." His confession stunned her. She stared at him, searching his eyes. "Why didn't you tell me before?" He hesitated. "Because the moment you knew, your life would change forever. And I I wanted you to have a normal life for as long as possible." Zara felt a strange mix of pain and gratitude. Before she could speak, a sound interrupted them, the sharp crack of a motorcycle engine. They spun around just in time to see two bikes speeding toward the entrance of the lot. "They found us," a man whispered. Instinct took over. A man grabbed her hand and pulled her between the empty car spaces, searching for cover. They ducked behind a rusted van, breath held as the bike screeched to a halt. Heavy boots hit the ground. The men's footsteps echoed, methodical, hunting. One of them spoke into a device. "Target sighted nearby. Spread out." Zara squeezed a man's hand, her palms cold with fear. They waited in tense silence, the seconds stretching endlessly. When the footsteps moved farther away, a man leaned close. "There's a safe house my father used years ago. It's remote. We can hide there until we plan our next move." Zara nodded weakly. She didn't trust her voice. They managed to sneak out of the parking lot through a broken fence on the far side. The streets were quieter now, but the danger lingered like a shadow behind them. They boarded an old bus heading toward the outskirts of the city. As they sat, Zara stared out the window, watching familiar places blur into the distance. Everything she knew was slipping away. Her home, her safety, her ordinary life. A man placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "You're not alone in this," he said softly. "We'll uncover the truth together." Zara wanted to believe him. She truly did. But deep inside, a storm was forming, of fear, anger, and determination. If her father sacrificed his life to expose this powerful organization, then she would not run forever. She would finish what he started, even if it meant risking everything. As the bus continued down the long, empty road, Zara made a silent vow. The silent order had taken too much from her. Now it was her turn. She would uncover the truth. She would seek justice, and she would not be silenced. Chapter 7. The Alibi Web. The bus rumbled steadily along the outskirts of the city, leaving behind the noise, danger, and suffocating uncertainty that had wrapped itself around Zara's life in the last 24 hours. With every passing kilometre, the buildings shrank, replaced by wide stretches of barren land and scattered greenery. Yet, despite the distance, the fear refused to loosen its grip. Zara kept glancing at the window, half expecting a black bike or a tinted car to appear behind them at any moment. A man noticed her trembling hands and leaned slightly closer. "They won't find us this easily," he whispered, though even he sounded unsure. His words were a fragile comfort in a world that no longer felt safe. The safe house was located far beyond the city, near an old abandoned settlement where no one ventured anymore. A man's father had used it during his work as an undercover officer, long before a man was even born. The bus stopped at a dusty roadside station, and from there they walked for nearly an hour through narrow, uneven paths surrounded by tall, whispering grass. Every rustle made Zara jump. She felt her senses sharpened, as if the danger had awakened something inside her that she never knew existed. A man finally pointed toward a small, weather-beaten structure hidden behind an overgrown thicket. "We're here." The safe house was simple, a one-floor building with faded brick walls and a metal door that screeched as it opened. Inside, it smelled of dust and old memories. A man quickly scanned the rooms, checking the windows, locks, and corners with practiced caution. "We're clear," he announced. Zara sat on an old wooden chair, exhaling shakily. "I can't believe this is real." Yesterday, I was just preparing for my exams, and now I'm running from killers." Her voice cracked and she pressed her palms against her face. Aman crouched beside her. "Life can change in a breath. I know it feels impossible right now, but you're stronger than you think." After securing the house, Aman opened his bag and took out a small laptop. Old, scratched but encrypted with a security system that he trusted with his life. "We need to continue decrypting the files," he said. "Everything depends on it. Your father hid the truth here, and the Silent Order is terrified of what's inside." Zara nodded, slowly composing herself. She watched as he connected the decrypted portion of the file with the new software he had installed. Lines of code filled the screen, a digital maze hiding answers they desperately needed. Minutes turned into hours. The safe house was silent except for the clicking of keys and the occasional sigh from Aman as he worked. Zara walked around the small rooms, trying to steady her mind. On one shelf, she found a faded photograph of Aman's father. A tall man with sharp eyes and a serious expression. She touched the frame gently, wondering what kind of man he had been, what dangers he had faced, and how much he had sacrificed. Her heart ached with the sudden realization that her father, too, had lived a life she never truly understood. A sudden beep from the laptop broke the silence. Aman straightened, his eyes widening. "It's open," he whispered. Zara rushed to his side. The file expanded, revealing folders, dozens of them, each labeled with cryptic titles: Operation Eclipse, Internal Manipulations, Fund Transfers, Elimination Orders, and more. Zara's breath caught. They were running an entire shadow government. Aman clicked another file, and a video played. It was grainy, but unmistakable, her father sitting in a dim room, speaking directly into the camera. "If you are watching this," the recording began, "it means I am already gone." Zara's knees went weak. Aman held her steady as she stared at the screen, unable to blink. The Silent Order will not stop. They control more than you can imagine. But this evidence, it can expose everything. They fear truth more than bullets. Her father paused, his eyes heavy with sorrow. "And to my daughter Zara, I am sorry. I never wanted you to be part of this. But if fate has led you here, know that you must be brave. You must finish what I could not." The video ended abruptly. Zara collapsed onto the chair, tears streaming down her face silently. Hearing his voice again shattered something inside her. Aman sat beside her, giving her the space to grieve. "He trusted you," Aman said softly, "enough to leave the final fight in your hands." After a long moment, Zara wiped her tears. There was pain in her eyes, but also something new. Determination. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. Aman turned back to the files. "We gather everything. Once we have the full picture, we take it to someone who can act on it, someone not controlled by the Silent Order." Zara nodded. "But who can we trust?" Aman hesitated. "There's one person, Inspector Rayan. My father trusted him before he disappeared. He's honest, and he's not afraid to challenge powerful people." Before they could continue, the lights inside the safe house flickered. A faint buzzing noise echoed from outside. Zara froze. "Did you hear that?" Aman moved quickly to the window and peeked outside. What he saw made his blood run cold. A drone hovered in the distance, scanning the area. "They found us," he whispered. Zara's heartbeat roared. "How?" Aman grabbed the laptop and shoved it back into his bag. "We don't have time to think. We need to escape. Now!" The buzzing grew louder, the drone now circling above, like a mechanical predator. Zara and Aman rushed toward the back door just as the sound of engines approached. Multiple vehicles, fast and aggressive. Aman's face was pale. "They're surrounding us." Zara's hands shook, but a fierce determination burned within her. "My father didn't die for nothing. We can't let them take the evidence." Aman grabbed her hand. "Then we fight smart. Follow me." And together they raced into the wilderness, the shadows of the Silent Order closing in behind them. But Zara was no longer just running. She was ready to fight back. Chapter 8. The Portrait's Whisper. The night wrapped around them like a heavy cloak as Zara and Aman sprinted through the thick wilderness, guided only by the faint glow of the moon. Branches whipped against their arms, and the uneven ground threatened to trip them at every step. But neither slowed down. Behind them, the drone's mechanical hum grew sharper, sweeping its cold light across the dark landscape like a hunting predator. Zara's lungs burned, but the fear of capture pushed her forward. The Silent Order wasn't just chasing them, they were closing in. Aman gripped her hand tightly as they ducked behind a cluster of boulders, their breaths loud in the stillness. "We need to move west," he whispered urgently. "If they block the road, the riverbank is our only escape." They waited until the drone drifted in the opposite direction, before slipping into a narrow, rocky trail that wound deeper into the forest. Trees towered above them, their shadows stretching long and ominous. Zara's mind raced with fragments of her father's video, his words, his fear, and the weight he had left on her shoulders. She felt something shift inside her, replacing helplessness with resolve. "They won't stop," she murmured. "As long as we have this evidence, they'll chase us to the ends of the earth." Aman glanced at her, his voice steady despite the danger. "I know, but that's exactly why we can't lose. Your father gave us the truth. Now we carry his fight." Minutes later, the low roar of water reached Zara's ears. The river was close, but so were the voices. Harsh, commanding shouts echoed through the trees. Men searching, moving in coordinated formation, the Silent Order's strike team. Aman motioned for her to crouch behind a fallen tree as flashlights sliced through the darkness. Zara's heartbeat thundered in her chest as heavy boots crunched through the leaves dangerously close. "Spread out!" one of the men barked. "They're here somewhere. The drone flagged movement." Zara covered her mouth with trembling fingers, praying her breath wouldn't give them away. For a terrifying moment, a beam of light paused just inches from her face. She shut her eyes, waiting for the inevitable. But the moment passed. The men moved forward, sweeping the area ahead. Aman slowly touched her arm, signaling her to follow him in the opposite direction. Staying low, they slipped through the undergrowth until the trees parted, revealing the rushing river ahead. Moonlight shimmered on the surface, turning the dark water into a silver trail, guiding them to hope or danger. Aman scanned the area. "If we follow the river downstream, there's an old service tunnel. My father mentioned it once. It connects to an abandoned railway route. Safe, hidden." Zara nodded, feeling her fear transform into silent determination. They carefully stepped into the shallow edge of the river, letting the cold water swallow their footsteps. Moving through the river slowed them, but it masked their trail. Behind them, the drone's buzzing grew louder again, this time sharper and more persistent. Zara looked up and saw it, hovering, its red sensor blinking rapidly. It had found them. "Run!" Aman shouted. Water splashed violently as they pushed downstream, their legs aching from the effort. The drone dipped lower, releasing a bright flare that illuminated the entire riverbank. "There!" Voices yelled from the forest. "They're in the water!" Panic surged through Zara as gunshots cracked through the night, bullets slicing into the water around them with deadly intent. Aman grabbed her arm and pulled her toward a cluster of large rocks jutting from the river, then dove behind them, water spraying as bullets struck the surface. "We can't stay here," Zara whispered frantically. Aman's eyes darted around, searching for any chance of escape. Then he spotted it, a dark opening beneath the largest rock, barely visible unless one looked from the right angle. "There," he said, "under the rock, it leads to a small cave." Zara hesitated only a second before following him into the narrow space. Cold water reached their waists as they squeezed through the tight passage, scraping their arms against jagged stone. Inside, the cave opened slightly, allowing them to catch their breath. The distant shouts were muffled here, drowned by the rushing river. Aman leaned against the stone wall, chest heaving. "We bought ourselves time," he said, his voice low. Zara touched her forehead, trying to calm the swirling storm inside her. "But they won't stop searching. They want the evidence more than our lives." Aman met her gaze. "Which means we have to get out of this forest and reach Inspector Rayan before dawn. He's our only chance." After a few minutes, they pushed deeper into the cave until it emerged behind a curtain of vines on the other side of the riverbank. The air outside was clearer, the night quieter. The Silent Order's forces were concentrated upstream, giving them a small window of escape. They climbed up a steep hill, reaching a narrow dirt road. Zara looked back one last time, watching the distant lights flicker between the trees. "My father died trying to expose them," she whispered. "I won't let them bury the truth." Aman placed a hand on her shoulder. "You won't be alone in this, not now, not ever." They followed the dirt road until they spotted an old abandoned shed at the foot of the hill. Inside, they found a rusted bicycle with a broken chain, old tools, and a dusty lantern. "We can't stay here," Zara said. "They'll spread out soon." Aman nodded, reaching for a map pinned to the shed's wall. Yellowed, torn, but still legible. He traced a route with his finger. "If we reach the service bridge, we can get to the railway tunnel. From there, the city outskirts are only 2 hours away." Zara exhaled slowly, gathering the courage she needed to continue. Exhaustion clung to her, but fear no longer controlled her steps. She looked at Aman and gave a small nod. "Let's go." As they stepped back into the night, the forest behind them erupted with new shouts. Closer, louder, more urgent. The Silent Order had discovered their tracks again, and the chase, more dangerous than ever, began once more. Chapter 9. Poirot's Revelation. The night had begun to thin, the sky shifting from deep black to a bruised indigo as Zara and Aman hurried along the narrow dirt path that led toward the service bridge. Every breath they took hung in the cold air, every footstep weighed down by exhaustion and urgency. The forest behind them was no longer silent. It pulsed with distant engines, scattered flashlights, and the relentless determination of men hunting them like prey. Zara's legs trembled with fatigue, but her mind remained sharp, fueled by the memory of her father's last message. She clutched the strap of Aman's backpack where the laptop, where the truth, was hidden. "We have to make it before sunrise," Aman murmured. "Once the light comes, they'll deploy more units. Drones, patrols, everything." Zara nodded silently, pushing through the ache in her body. The time for fear had passed. Now, Only survival and purpose mattered. They reached the old service bridge just as the wind began to pick up. It stretched across a steep ravine, the wooden planks cracked from years of neglect. Aman tested the first board with his foot. It groaned ominously. "We don't have a choice," he said, stepping onto it carefully. Zara followed, gripping the rusting metal rail as the bridge swayed slightly under their combined weight. Below them, the ravine plunged into darkness, the sound of rushing water echoing faintly. Halfway across, the distant wail of engines grew louder. Zara froze, turning her head toward the forest. Black vehicles were tearing through the trees, headlights cutting through the fading darkness. "Aman!" she whispered, fear rising like smoke. He grabbed her hand. "Don't look back! Just move!" They rushed across the remaining length of the bridge and stumbled onto solid ground just as the first vehicle screeched to a halt on the opposite side. Flashlights flared. Voices shouted. Aman didn't hesitate. He kicked the side support beam of the bridge with all his strength. Rusted, already weakened from age, the beam snapped with a violent crack. The bridge lurched. Zara gasped as the wooden planks collapsed inward, falling into the ravine with a thunderous crash. The agents on the other end scrambled back, their shouts swallowed by chaos. Aman grabbed Zara's hand and pulled her into the cover of the trees. "That won't stop them for long," he said breathlessly. "Move!" The forest here was denser, the trees twisted and ancient. The path sloped downward toward what Aman believed was the entrance to the abandoned railway system. Zara's heart pounded as they navigated through brambles and uneven terrain. Her clothes were torn, her palms bleeding from earlier scrapes, but she didn't slow down. Aman led the way, guided by faint traces of old markings carved into tree trunks, symbols his father had once shown him. "He used this route," Aman whispered, almost to himself. "He knew someday someone might need to follow his steps." Suddenly, the trees parted, revealing a long, dark tunnel carved into the hillside. The stone entrance was coated in moss, and rusted metal rails led into its shadowed depths. Zara hesitated. "Are you sure it's safe?" she asked, her voice unsteady. Aman nodded. "Safe? No, but it's our best chance." Before stepping inside, he pulled out a small flashlight from his bag and flicked it on. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing walls lined with old pipes and scattered debris. Together they entered the tunnel, swallowed by the cold, damp air. Inside, the silence was suffocating. Their footsteps echoed against the stone walls, creating a hollow rhythm that followed them like a warning. Zara stayed close to Aman, the dim light barely illuminating the path. "This place feels haunted," she whispered. Aman gave a faint, tired smile. "Everything feels haunted when you're running for your life." They walked for several minutes before the tunnel finally opened into a larger chamber, a place where multiple abandoned tracks intersected. Rusted tools lay scattered on the ground, and old machinery stood like silent sentinels. Aman stopped, scanning the space. "There's a maintenance route on the left," he said. "It leads out toward the city's edge." Just as they were about to move, a low rumble echoed through the tunnel. Not natural, not distant. Zara's stomach dropped. "They're here," she whispered. Aman quickly shut off the flashlight, plunging them into darkness. They pressed themselves behind an old metal container as footsteps approached, heavy and purposeful. The silent order had tracked them even into the underground. Voices bounced off the stone walls. "Spread out," one man ordered. "They can't be far." Zara held her breath, every muscle in her body tense. She could feel Aman's hand searching for hers in the dark, steadying her. The sound of footsteps grew closer. A faint beam of light swept across the chamber, missing them by inches. Zara's heart thundered. She bit her lip to keep from gasping. Another beam of light flickered, searching the shadows. Time stretched painfully until finally, the footsteps faded, moving deeper into the right side of the tunnel. Aman squeezed Zara's hand. "Now," he whispered. They slipped out quietly, keeping low as they moved toward the maintenance route. The air grew colder as they approached a narrow metal stairway leading upward. At the top was a small hatch covered in dirt and leaves. Aman pushed it open, revealing the early light of dawn creeping over the horizon. They climbed out into an overgrown field at the city's outskirts. The buildings were visible in the distance, civilization, safety, and the possibility of survival. Zara inhaled deeply, tasting freedom for the first time in hours. But Aman's expression was grim. "They're not far behind," he said. "We need to reach Inspector Rayan before they do. Everything depends on it." Zara tightened her grip on the backpack. "Then let's finish this." As they hurried toward the city, the sun finally broke over the horizon, painting the world gold. And somewhere behind them, the Silent Order emerged from the tunnel, still hunting, still relentless. The final confrontation was drawing near. Chapter 10. Justice in Florence. The streets of Florence awakened with the soft glow of morning sunlight, golden rays spilling over terracotta roofs and narrow alleyways. Zara and Aman moved quickly through the quiet avenues, the city unaware of the danger creeping behind them. Every step brought them closer to Inspector Rayan, their last hope, and closer to exposing the Silent Order. Zara's heart pounded not only with fear, but with determination. Her father's voice, recorded on the laptop, echoed in her mind. "Be brave, finish what I could not." She tightened her grip on the bag containing the evidence, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders, but also a fiery resolve. Today, the truth would finally confront the shadows. They reached a small, nondescript building on the edge of the city, where Inspector Rayan had arranged to meet them. The office was simple, unassuming, yet bristling with the quiet authority of a man accustomed to dealing with corruption and secrets. Zara and Aman entered cautiously, and Rayan rose immediately, his sharp eyes assessing their state. "You're late," he said, though his tone held concern more than scolding. "And it seems trouble followed you here." Aman set the laptop on the desk and opened the encrypted files. Rayan leaned in, scanning the documents quickly, his expression tightening with each revelation. "The Silent Order," he muttered. "They've infiltrated every branch of government, finance, security. No wonder your father disappeared. And now they're after you." Zara swallowed hard. "We have everything he left, all the proof." Rayan nodded solemnly. "This changes everything, but be warned, their reach is vast. One wrong move, and it's over." Aman glanced at Zara. "We can't wait. If they regroup, we'll lose this chance." Rayan tapped a finger against the desk. "Then we must move carefully. Strategy, not speed, will win this battle." He gestured toward a secure communication line. "I can coordinate a small team to support you, but you will need to confront the key figures personally. Only you hold the evidence strong enough to bring them down." The plan took shape quickly. Zara felt a mixture of fear and adrenaline. Their target was a clandestine meeting at a private villa where the Silent Order's core council would gather. It was risky, direct confrontation, but it was the only way to expose the truth. The morning passed in tense preparation. Zara studied the files, memorizing names, dates, and transactions. Every detail mattered. Aman checked their equipment: cameras, recording devices, backup drives. Rayyan monitored the city for any signs of surveillance. The hours crawled by with the weight of inevitability. Zara's resolve hardened. This was her father's fight, and she would see it through. By mid-afternoon, they moved toward the villa, hidden among tall cypress trees on the outskirts. Every street corner and alleyway was scouted carefully, avoiding the agents who might still be tracking them. Zara felt her pulse in her throat. The moment of confrontation was near. As they approached the grand gates, a sleek black car appeared in the distance, headlights dimmed but unmistakable. Aman signaled for them to duck. The silent order had anticipated resistance. Their operatives were everywhere. Zara pressed closer to the wall, listening to her own ragged breaths. But there was no time for hesitation. They had to act now. Inside the villa, the Silent Order's council sat at a large mahogany table, discussing financial manipulations and political influence with cold calculation. Their leader, a man Zara recognized from her father's files as Alessandro Vitale, held a commanding presence, sharp eyes scanning documents and people with a predator's focus. Zara felt a chill as she realized the scale of power they wielded. Yet, despite the fear, she stepped forward with Aman beside her, laptop in hand. "This ends today," she said, her voice firm. The room froze. Vitale's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. A murmur of confusion rippled through the council. Aman connected the laptop to the large screen, projecting every transaction, every payment, every corrupt connection onto the wall for all to see. The council members recoiled as their secrets were laid bare. Zara's hands trembled slightly, but she maintained eye contact with Vitale. "You hid behind influence and fear," she said, "but the truth is stronger than your control. My father's evidence exposes everything." Vitale rose slowly, trying to maintain composure, but the panic was evident. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he hissed. Zara met his gaze steadily. "I have an idea of exactly what you've done, and now everyone will know." The Silent Order scrambled to salvage control, but it was too late. Emails, documents, and photographs of illicit transactions were projected to the media contacts Rayyan had coordinated. Calls went out to law enforcement agencies across the city, all linked to the incontrovertible evidence on the laptop. Members of the council tried to seize the laptop, but Aman and Zara blocked their path, reinforced by Rayyan's team strategically positioned outside. Chaos erupted in the villa. Phones rang incessantly, emails pinged relentlessly, and Vitale's carefully constructed empire began to crumble in real time. Zara felt an unexpected surge of triumph, tempered by exhaustion. For hours, they monitored the fallout as arrests were coordinated and the media broadcasted the exposure across Florence. The Silent Order's network, once untouchable, disintegrated under the weight of truth. Zara allowed herself a brief moment to exhale, leaning against Aman. "It's over," she whispered. "We did it." He nodded, though his eyes remained vigilant. "Over for now, but the world they built, it won't disappear overnight. You've just lit a fire that will continue." As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting Florence in shades of amber and rose, Zara walked to the balcony, looking over the city her father had loved. The fear, the running, the nights filled with shadows, they had all led to this moment. She felt her father's presence in the wind, in the warmth of the sunlight on her face. She had honored his courage, faced the darkness and brought the truth to light. For the first time in days, she allowed herself a sense of peace. Rayan approached quietly. "You've done something remarkable today. Your father would be proud." Zara smiled faintly. "I just followed the path he left for me." The city below hummed with life, oblivious to the storm that had raged in the shadows, now silenced. Aman joined them, taking Zara's hand. Together they watched the evening descend, knowing that while dangers might still linger in hidden corners, the battle for justice had been won. And in the quiet, Zara made a promise to protect the truth, to continue her father's work, and to never allow shadows to reign unchallenged again. Florence, with all its history and beauty, had witnessed the fall of a secret empire, and the cry of injustice had finally been answered.